So Freya, this afternoon I've got to go and meet the Agriculture Minister for Ontario. Ontario? How do you say that actually? Ontario? Ontario, Canada, for the province of Ontario. I'm going to try and get him to be an avid agronomics listener. How do you think I should do it?
Oh, good question. Maybe you should have a highlights package of all of the hilarious quotes that we've come up with in the last, 4 months.
A promo, that's a great idea. We
Yeah.
need a trailer promo that I could play and then sell it to him, and then we can talk about complex things. As long as we don't put the stupid stuff in the first, I want him to take it seriously. Hello, you're listening to Agonomics. I'm David Udall and welcome to the show. Each week, I'm joined by colleagues from AHDB to help explain the numbers behind the stories, the economics of agriculture, as it were. The focus of this episode is the pig industry. Senior livestock analyst Freya Shuttleworth is here to run through the pork outlook. We'll go through the market stability, what we expect the breeding herd figures to do, as well as going through imports and exports. Please follow or subscribe to this podcast to make sure you don't miss an episode. New shows drop every Wednesday at midday. And please get in touch. Comment on any of AHDB's social channels or email us. agonomics@ahdb.org.uk and let us know where you're listening. So I just want to say thank you for sticking with the show. With our listener figures growing all the time, it's good to know we're delivering something of interest and of use, I hope. But maybe you just like the silly games. And speaking of which, Freya and I will be slipping in song titles throughout the podcast. So I'm challenging you to guess the music act, and we'll reveal the answer at the end. And before we get into it with Freya, actually, we've got a big international trade show coming up that AHDB is attending. AHDB staff as well as levy payers attending. It's the CL trade show, which is in Paris, which is over the weekend. So a lot of big businesses coming together to discuss international trade and markets and information, which is of interest. And some of our analysts are going as well. So we'll be there representing all of our levy payers and supporting the export market as well. And it's always a fantastic event, so I'm sure we'll be very much looking forward to that. Right, Freya, I want to be talking about pork now. But before we do that, actually, we mentioned CL. So you're going to that trade show, aren't you, with our colleague Hannah Clark, who covers the beef and sheep and pork sector as well. And also, we're going to be talking about trade later on. And you visited the Philippines earlier this year with our export team, didn't you? So we're going to be learning a bit more about that.
Yeah, it was a great trip back in February.
Right, before we get to that, let's rewind. Let's go back to the start of the year, actually, as you said, sort of January, February time. And as we've mentioned on this podcast a couple of times with the pork market, it's been an extremely stable time. So January, February, the pork price, the standard pig price was around 212 pence per kilo, and it's drifted slightly lower as the year's gone on, but relatively stable. We're now about sort of 208 pence a kilo mark. Not huge volatility, which is probably something that actually the pork market is quite thankful for, considering the volatility that we'd seen in the previous years. But it has been a steady old market for the year.
It really has been, yeah. There's been very little fluctuation in the pig price, although it has been edging downwards slightly, and it is now below where it was this time last year, but we were at record highs this time last year. We're still substantially above the 5-year average when it comes to the pig price, which for producers has meant also that their estimated cost of production that we produce quarterly has also stayed very stable. We've seen minimal movement in that since Q2 last year.
So we're coming out of a steady period, which, as we said, is a bit of the odd thing for pork, that the market has been so stable. But you've been working on our pork outlook, haven't you, Freya, going forwards? So
yeah.
Let's forget about the past, look forward to the future. And if it's not too much, let's go through the outlook for where we go from here. So what does the world look like going ahead?
Yeah, so at the moment, pig slaughter is actually up year on year. So are carcass weights. And it's mainly that carcass weight that is actually driving our quite substantial year on year growth in pig meat production volumes. Carcass weights have been over a kilo heavier in 2024 than they were in 2023, which is really driving those pig meat production volumes. And we're forecasting that trend will continue for the rest of the year, really, and that pig meat production will end 2024 around 2.7% higher than it was in 2023. So some quite strong growth year on year.
So if that production is up 2.7%, you said, wasn't it? 2.7%.
Yeah.
What do we think that will do for the clean pig kill? Is that going to see a similar trend going forwards?
Yeah, so clean pig kill will also rise, but at a smaller rate. So we're looking at about 1.5%. So that would lead us at 10.2 million head total for the year.
Just thinking of it in terms of, we're talking about pigs here, and there may be some people listening to this podcast that are not pig experts. So shall we define what a standard pig is and what a clean pig is, just so everyone's clear? So standard pig, putting you on the spot here, this isn't a test. How do we define a standard pig?
A standard pig is what we use in our pricing series. So it would be what is classed as a finishing pig. So any pig that is born and bred and fattened for the point of slaughter.
And then a clean pig would be?
A clean pig effectively follows the same definition. It's the terminology we use when talking about slaughter numbers to clarify that we're not including sows and boars. So we're not including breeding animals in those kill figures.
That makes perfect sense. And segues us nicely to talk about the breeding herd, because we've seen a small decline in the breeding herd for 2024. But do we expect that to rebound going forwards?
Yeah, so the DEFRA stats for the June survey that have been published were only England. So England accounts for about 75% of the total pig population of the UK. Those figures showed that the female breeding herd specifically had fallen 2% year on year. We have estimated that down a little bit on a UK scale, so we think it will be about a 1% decline year on year when those publicly available figures are available later in the year. We've based that off there being quite mixed industry sentiment at the moment, although most people would say industry is definitely a much more positive place than it has been for the last couple of years. We definitely are still seeing some businesses shut up shop and close and decide to leave. However, we are getting plenty of reports that there is investment on farm, breeding sales are doing well, and that some companies are looking to expand. So it's kind of a balance.
So I suppose it's a bit of an interesting outlook going forwards, because obviously we're kind of saying that from a market perspective for the last year, essentially, we've been in a very stable position, high-priced position. Going forwards, we might see, a bit of higher production as we go through 25. But it's interesting as well, obviously, cost of production, and we've spoken about this before in terms of the impact that the cereals market has, that obviously with a much smaller crop for this harvest year for 24, that's supported UK prices, but actually we've seen global markets start to drop over time. So actually, and we don't expect from the cereals market there to be any particular fireworks now, because the market seems pretty set. So it could be a bit of more of a positive time in the short term, I think, from a pork producer point of view, because we're talking about slight increase in growth. Cost of production from a feed input side isn't rampantly aggressive, and it seems as if it's sort of being sort of tempered by the global outlook. So short term, maybe through the winter months and into the early spring, could be a supportive time for pork margins.
Definitely. Obviously, there are some risk factors. So there are, of course, our forecast has not been written factoring in an outbreak of disease such as African swine fever, which we have seen progressively get closer to the UK border, but is currently not in the country, and we hope it stays that way, but we can't forecast for that one. And obviously if something came in like that, it would be very detrimental to the whole industry.
Thank you, Freya. I tell you what, we've had the headlines. Let's stop there. We're going to take a break now to get the latest market information, and then you'll be joining me in the second half to talk in more detail. Please say you'll be there. Otherwise, I think I'm going to be wasting my time trying to go through the details of the pork outlook, where we're going to be talking about export markets, geopolitical factors, imports, and how that demand picture looks.
Hi, I'm Olivia Bonser, Senior Analyst at AHDB, with a look at grain and oilseed markets for the week commencing the 6th of January. Despite some support in wheat markets over the Christmas period, prices have been under pressure in the new year from a strengthening US dollar, technical selling and sluggish global demand. However, Russian wheat crop conditions remain in focus, with warmer than usual temperatures and excess moisture in key growing regions. Persistent hot and dry weather in Argentina is also raising concern over the country's maize crop, which is now in its critical development stage. For rapeseed, new crop prices are supported, with doubts over prospects for global rapeseed production in 2025, though forecasts of heavy soybean supplies from South America limit any major price increases. Over the next few weeks, weather in major exporting countries such as South America and Russia will be key in driving prices. The USDA will also release updated global supply and demand estimates at the end of this week. To stay up to date with the latest data and analysis across arable, red meat and dairy markets, head to hdb.org.uk and click on Markets and Prices.
If you're in the market for another podcast to subscribe to, then look no further than our Manager's Special, AHDB's Food and Farming podcast. Recent episodes include a consumer insight offering on red meat labels and supermarket aisles, as well as a dairy special about our work with retailers to promote milk. If you're after herbs, or rather herbal lays, our shelves are stacked with sage advice on how to introduce lucerne and clover into your fields. In fact, we cater for all tastes, so you'll find sections dedicated to all sectors: pork, cereals and oilseeds, dairy and beef and lamb. And don't forget our middle aisle, where you can often pick up a bargain episode you didn't know you needed to listen to. Search Food and Farming wherever you get your podcasts. AHDB thanks you for your custom.
So we're back with Freya Shuttleworth, a senior livestock analyst, talking about pork markets. And we've talked about the stability of 2024 and the potential for a slight increase in supply going forward in the outlook that we've produced, all available on our website. We'll make sure the link's available with the podcast blurb, etc., etc. But let's talk now about, I suppose, things that are a bit more of a challenge in the pork market going forwards. The first of those is around export markets. And obviously from a pork perspective, you know, it's a carcass balance that is very delicate in the pork side. There is a large portion of a carcass which we export because it is products like offal, etc., that we don't consume domestically. So we're very, very reliant on these export markets, specifically Asian markets as well, where a lot of these products are highly sought after and where the demand is. But we're seeing some sort of increased geopolitical tensions going forwards, Freya, aren't we, that might impact how we operate in those export markets?
Definitely. So the EU is the main supplier of pig meat to China. However, they are having a little bit of a fallout regarding their trade policies at the moment, regarding tariffs for a variety of different products. And China announced that it's putting a probe into EU pig meat imports. This, although could be seen as an opportunity in the sense that if high tariffs are put on EU pig meat imports for China, could mean that the UK looks more favourable, we are limited by our production volumes as to how much of that gap we could fill. The risk factor is also that if there is a lot of EU pig meat on the global market that now no longer has a home, because it's no longer favourable to end up in China, it could outcompete some of our other key export markets in the Southeast Asian region, or also some of the higher end product that does get shipped may come into the EU, it may stay in the EU and potentially come into the UK and put further pressure on our domestic prices.
Yeah, it's going to be a tight balance, and I suppose in a way, we talk about kind of commodity cycles, and we've been in a very stable market, but we can't forget that all markets that we operate in now are so hyper-connected. Was a word that I saw in a market report over the last few days. Hyper-connected is probably a great way to describe it, and so everything is intrinsically linked, and it's a complex world and a complex thing, especially when you have carcass balance and export markets. But I think it is something that is a definite risk. And on that note, Freya, you visited with our export team our third largest market for pork exports to the Philippines earlier this year, and you recorded a little bit for us in preempting the podcast in advance. You were well ahead of your time, a little bit around how the market operates over there.
Hello, I'm Freya Shuttleworth, Senior Analyst for AHDB. I'm currently out in Manila. Today I've been at a wet market looking at the various pork products available. Consumers in the Philippines prefer fresh product over frozen product. Fresh product generally comes from their own domestic supply, whereas frozen product is imported. On top of the usual primal cuts, there is plenty of offal available. There is also heads, trotters, skin, extra fat, and all of these are used as key ingredients in classic Filipino dishes. There is some frozen product available to purchase at the wet market. This comes in large chunks of meat and is then trimmed by butchers behind the stall to the portion size required by the customer. With African swine fever continuing to cause issues with domestic supply in the Philippines, imports will still be relied upon to fill the gap in the market. Although today we haven't seen any British pork on the stands, we have seen product from Brazil and Spain.
Well, just before that started, I said that they were our third largest export market, and you ended up with saying that there wasn't any products on the UK products on the shelf. But I don't think you're selling me duff facts, Freya. I think that was just more a matter of circumstance, but it just shows, I suppose, the level of competition that we face from other countries around the world to enter into these Asian markets.
Yeah, I definitely wasn't wasting my time, because we have huge competition from Brazil and the US in particular, who at the moment can really undercut on a cost basis the UK and the EU into those cheaper fifth quarter based markets.
Right, so let's move on and talk about imports now, because we've covered exports there and everything going out of the country. And I suppose something that's another risk as well, that's also bound in as part of that big global trade element, is around imports. And we've seen a period, I suppose, on the shelves where pork products are struggling to compete with other proteins, chicken specifically. But there could be some food service demand that increases imports. But we also have a bit of a pricing challenge with our European neighbours, don't we?
We do. So the EU prices versus the UK prices, if we look at the reference price series, have been dropping for quite a while now, for a number of months, and at a far more substantial rate than the UK. This has meant the differential between those prices has grown, which to some purchasers might make them think that EU product is more attractive on a cost basis.
So let's just put some of those prices into context. So let's look at, say, the Spanish market actually sort of late summer onwards has had a sharp downturn. So the Spanish market for the majority of the summer was kind of trading just sort of in the high 180s pence per kilo mark, but since sort of August time has dropped sharply and is now in sort of low 170s. The German market has gone from just below 200 pence a kilo to now looking in the sort of mid 170s. And then, yeah, I mean, suppose the Dutch and Danish market, which is obviously important from our perspective, has definitely seen a gap. They're now trading down at sort of around 140 to 150 pence a kilo. So it's a significant discount from, especially, that Danish market, when we're trading at just under 210. You're talking about essentially a 60 to 70 pence per kilo discount for where the rest of the market is trading. I think that just highlights that there is a significant price risk that we have there. And whilst we've seen a stable period of prices, and we've said that short-term wise, margins are relatively supported by stable grain prices, that is a real risk that could erode margins if we see a UK price that starts to follow that same European trend.
Yeah, there's definitely a short-term risk that we will see some downward pressure on the on domestic prices. On the positive side, Christmas tends to be the key demand period, so we might see a little bit of uplift on the prices, or at least some further stability as everybody enters Christmas wrapping period.
Christmas wrapping period. Christmas wrapping by the Waitresses, I think, is my favourite Christmas song. Is it a bit early to talk about Christmas songs? But you mentioned it and I like it. Anyway, talking about Christmas and talking about demand, let's still talk about demand in the bigger scale of everything. How have we looked, I suppose, from the retail side, and what's the view forward in that?
So the retail side has been performing fairly consistently in our monthly data sets at about minus 2% year on year. So we're forecasting that to continue for the rest of this year. So 2024 even, will be ending the year about 2% down on volume terms and purchases in the retail setting. But for 25, we think it will be a bit more stable. We are obviously awaiting the autumn budget, but recently some of our domestic economic indicators have indicated that we might just see 25 be more flat and stable.
And if you want to spice up your life and have some interesting pork recipes in order to help support that retail demand, let's not forget we have our Love Pork website, which has a load of pork recipes on, including things like Asian-inspired pork fillet by Marc Pugh. I don't know who Marc Pugh is. Is he like a... No. I don't know. No. Anyway, his Asian-inspired pork fillet looks lovely. So, Mark, if you're listening, probably not, but if you are, Yeah, looks nice, mate. So yeah, so it's that thing from a retail perspective, isn't it? There's a lot of competition from the poultry side. We saw obviously a lot of promotion for lamb. There's a lot of, as we heard from our retail colleagues last week, there's a lot of new lamb products that are being put on the shelves as well. So it's a competitive market domestically, and it seems at the moment as if pork needs to be shown some love, I think, doesn't it, really? Just to kind of give it some extra support. But as you say, Christmas could be good.
Christmas is a good period. And unfortunately, this miserable lack of summer that we've had this year didn't help any of the barbecue products that most of the retailers had put some quite good ranges out. So that was definitely a bit of a shame this year. So
overall, I think we're saying that we've seen a needed calm period in 2024 because of just the whole market conditions that we've seen. Stable prices, supply and demand relatively stable, the market's been okay. But going forwards, there are some, again, positives that we're seeing a slight increase in supply. Again, feed prices are rampantly high and therefore supporting cost of production, but there's still some risks going forwards, especially in that global perspective with the bigger, wider geopolitical issues and what is, a drop in European market. So the pork market for 2025 may be a very different proposition. Right, thank you, Freya. I think we've gone through everything in the pork market there, and I think we've done a top job of getting in the song titles. So much so, Martin, I would like you to, before I announce who the artist was, replay that moment where I managed to get 4 song titles into one brief moment in time, which I will never be able to do again, and I'm well happy about. Thank you, Freya. I tell you what, we've had the headlines. Let's stop there. We're going to take a break now to get the latest market information, and then you'll be joining me in the second half to talk in more detail. Please say you'll be there. Otherwise, I think I'm going to be wasting my time trying to go through the details of the pork outlook. And for those that need a nudge, if it wasn't so obvious that you didn't get it from that, it was indeed Spice Girls. So thank you to Kim from the Retail and Consumer Insight team who joined on the podcast last week, who suggested that. I was well happy when she said Spice Girls. I'm really glad we did that. So it was great. Freya, our pork outlook, all available on the website, isn't it?
It is online. It was published end of September.
Beautiful. So all online for everyone to go through. But it's been really interesting to talk about pork markets. So thank you, Freya. And next week, actually, I believe we're going to continue the geopolitical angle where we're going to be talking on a bigger perspective of the bigger, wider world of geopolitics and how it impacts agriculture. And that'll be with my colleague, Sarah Baker. So looking forward to that. I was stopping, if I'm honest, because I thought I was going to burp. I took a deep breath and I was like, is that just going to come back out in a way that I don't want it to? There's your highlights package, Freya. This is the Christmas promo done in 10 minutes, isn't it?